All right. Well, we are in part 3 of a message series called BC, which means before Christ. We're talking about the stories, the people, the lessons from the Old Testament, the whole part of the Bible that is about, rather before Jesus came into the picture. We refer to it as the Old Testament. The Jewish people refer to it as their Bible, it's their scriptures, because we have also the New Testament, which deals with the life, the ministry of Jesus, and then the church that came after it. And what's cool is that, the Old Testament is really kind of big compared to the New Testament. This is the Old Testament, and this is the New Testament. So we're spending some time here, but also, this is very important, 55 to 60% of the world appreciate these scriptures, that they see them as important, or perhaps even as holy text. And then lastly, for us, we want to look at these stories because these are the stories that Jesus grew up reading. These are the stories that his people, the Jewish people in the first century, would talk about. They considered these stories absolutely important to their identity in who they were. So we're taking some look at these stories. Now, in week 1 of this series, Lou spent some time talking about the first people, Adam and Eve. And then last week in week 2, he spent some time looking at a whole entire book of the Old Testament called Esther, which deals with her life and everything that went on there. If you have missed those 2 weeks, I recommend you go back and check them out on our app, on the webpage, or on YouTube. You can look them up. For this week, we're going to spend some time looking at the person, the forefather of the family that is mentioned in the Old Testament. One of the ways you can talk about the Old Testament is that it was the way in which God showed himself to the world through a family. And we're going to spend some time looking at the forefather of that exact family. Because his story, particularly the beginning, we're not going to do the whole thing. That takes up 14, 15 chapters. We don't have the time for that. Today, we're going to take a look at the beginning of his story because he had to answer a particular question several times that I think you and I have both had to deal with countless times. It's when things aren't the way they're supposed to be. And it's this question right here. It's what do we do when things don't go according to plan? Particularly when it doesn't even feel like it's our plan. Perhaps it's God's plan. What do we do? Which way do we turn? Do we keep moving forward? Do we pause? Do we go backwards? Do we change plans? Do we take a detour? What ought we do when there's a wrench in the gears? When there's a roadblock? When there's some kind of hiccup that was not supposed to be there? It doesn't feel like it belongs in the story. I can attest that I've had to deal with this question thousands of times in my life. 2 really stick out in particular because it was a time in my life when I felt like me and God were on the same page, when things were going in the right direction. So it goes back like this. I've been a musician for a really long time. I love music. I've always loved music. I'm just drawn to it. And I started playing instruments in 4th grade, picked up guitar when I was 12, and I've just fell in love with the guitar. And at some point in my teenage years, my love for music felt like it hit together with a call from God, not like a phone call, but I felt like there was a possibility that my love for music could line up with what he wanted for my life. So I started being involved in church with music. I've been a part of Sunday services for over 25 years. And it's always been great. I felt man, I'm getting to do what I love, but also for God and for his people, I can be a benefit to the church, and all of these things will come together. But on 2 different occasions, I have had a guitar that I use in church stolen from the church. Yeah, that's how I felt too. What? Okay, God, what? I would sing and play this guitar from the platform and sing these songs. They're Jesus songs. And those instruments have been taken from me, but also taken out of the church building. And just what? How does this fit together? God, I'm doing this for you, man. This is your gig. This was your idea. You gave me the love for music, and now the instruments that I'm using have been stolen. The conclusion I probably should have come to, God was that's enough with the music. Hang it up. But I'm persistent and stubborn. And so I kept at it, and I'm still going at it, to this day. But the point is, I actually felt what? How does this fit? If I'm doing the God thing, and it feels like everything's going right, and this happens, well, how am I supposed to make sense of that? Why? Really? isn't this all supposed to be part of the plan? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? What do I do now? Like, I'm left a little feeling, doubtful, frustrated, confused, sad that my instruments that I loved are gone. And maybe you've never had a guitar stolen out of a church before, but you've probably had those same feelings where you feel like, oh, there was a period of time where things were going well, right? Like you were moving in the right direction. Maybe you'd say even like it felt like God was a part of the plan and you were like moving in a healthy direction. And then something shifted. There was some kind of roadblock, something that just kind of messed things up and you're like, whoa, I don't understand where this came from, why this is there. Maybe it was something you did, maybe it was something somebody else did, or maybe it was just life. It's like, I got to figure out what I'm supposed to do now. This doesn't feel like it's supposed to fit. Maybe in your world, it's like you've been working hard at the college thing or the career thing, and you've been going down this path, and you really feel like, okay, that's the way I'm supposed to go. And it almost feels like God's opening doors, and things are coming into your life, and you're like, wow, this kind of all fits together. And then you finally arrive at the school, or you got into the major or the program, or you're at the company, and you're like, holy moly, this is totally not what I want. This doesn't fit at all. Like, it's like, what was I hearing before? Was I hearing clearly? Or maybe it's for you, it's about a relationship thing. You've been spending some time trying to work on yourself, and you've been single for a while, but you don't want to be, and you're trying to figure this out, navigate those circumstances, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna try this a different way. I'm gonna try to be the person I think God wants me to be, and to be the type of partner or spouse that I'm supposed to be, and you're trying, and it feels good for a while, but then something happens, and the results don't seem to make sense in light of the direction you've been headed in. You're like, what do I do now? What do I do when things don't go according to plan? Perhaps it's just a faith thing for you. You're just like, you know what, I want to give this God stuff a try. And so you started attending a church, you're reading your Bible, you're praying. Maybe you've joined a group, and for a time it feels like, yes, like I'm in and I'm walking in God's purpose. Like I know he has a plan laid out for me and I'm living in it. And then something hits. And you're just like, what the heck? What, how does this fit with the plan? And it's not even my plan, it's God's plan. And if that's you, if you've asked this question, what do we do when things don't go according to plan? I think today's story, the person we're looking at today, will be very helpful. Because there's some things we can learn from him that we ought not to do, and some things that later in his story that we can then actually try, and I think it'll make all the difference. So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to take a look at this guy's story. It starts in Genesis 12. Now, I should mention, in the first week, talking about Adam and Eve, that's Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. Like, this is the first book of the Bible, the Old Testament. We're skipping the next, 9 chapters and getting to chapter 12. There's some really fascinating stuff in there. I recommend you go read 4 through 11. But we're jumping in right at 12, and this is how it begins. The Lord had said to Abram. So this is the guy. This is who we're looking at. Abram. You may have heard of his name as Abraham. His name changes. We're not going to even get to that part of the story, but his name turns into Abraham. But his story starts out amazing. Right out of the gate. This is the beginning of his story. And God is already speaking to him. Now, I have been a Jesus follower for a long time. I will admit I've never heard God's voice audibly. I wish I would. It'd make things a lot easier. This guy gets it from day one. Unfair. All right. He says to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household. He's like, just get out of this place. I want you to leave and go to the place, the land, that I will show you. And here's why. If you do this, basically, next slide, yep. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. This is God speaking to Abram. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. And he goes on and says, I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That's an unbelievable promise. Abram, you don't understand. If you leave this place, I'm going to turn your little household into a huge family. A family so great, so wonderful, that it will be a nation that blesses the entirety of the world. And so naturally, if you heard that blessing, you probably do like Abram. It says he went, just as the Lord had told him. He's like, this is fantastic news. I'm going. And it says, and they, Abram's household, set out for the land of Canaan, which is an important area and a person in the previous and later chapters. and they arrived there in Canaan. Now, this one sentence sums up a journey of about 700 miles. So I'm not sure how the author of Genesis gets away with it, but that's like 4 months of travel, of taking your entire household. They didn't have cars and trains and planes and Uber and U-Haul, right? They were packing their stuff onto the backs of camels or walking on foot, setting up tents day and night to like sleep and rest in between. They traveled 700-ish miles. And they get there. Pretty amazing. And then his story gets even more impressive. It says, the Lord appeared to Abram. Not only is God speaking to him, now he's seeing God. He's seeing him in a totally brand new way. Like, this is absolutely remarkable. Like, there's no doubt that God showed up, essentially, what this is saying. And God says to him, to your descendants, to your children, their children, and beyond, I will give this land. Like, dude, you've arrived. You've been on the journey. I told you to leave, and you did it, and you got to the place. This is the place that's going to be in your family forever and ever. And this is what happens. This is Abram's response. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Which is an interesting response. You know, if God ever appears to me, like, and I see him, like, with my own eyes, I don't know if that would be my first go-to thing. I think I'd probably go run and tell everyone. I'd be like, you're not going to believe this, probably, but check this out. Like, God showed up in my life. He, it says, gathered stones and built like a platform. And that altar was probably used to perform some kind of animal sacrifice, like a ritual, in order to like honor God. And that's what he does. So now Abram and his crew, his whole family, they're in the land of Canaan, and they're now like traveling through the land. They're exploring the area. And this is what it says. After that, Abram traveled south and set up camp in the hill country with Bethel to the west, and that's I, not AI. Like, ChatGPT was not involved in the writing of this story. It says that I was to the east. So he's settling in like the hill country because it would be like safer to live in the hills than on the plains. And there he built another altar to the Lord and then called on the name of the Lord. That is to worship. That is to call on Yahweh and to be like, you've been guiding me, keep guiding me. And then he continues his travels, and this is what it says. Then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. That's just the south part. It would be south of Jerusalem. It's a big desert land area, not too much happening in there. And this is where things really start to turn, where the hiccup shows up, where the wrench gets thrown in the gears, like the roadblock occurs now that he's here. And this is what it says. It says, now there was a famine in the land. A famine, meaning there's not food. There's no food to eat. They're going to starve to death. And it's so bad that it says Abram he went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. How would you be feeling if you were in his shoes at this point? You're like, yes, I did it. I left my whole family and household behind. I did what God wanted. I'm on the path. I show up to the place, and he's like, you did it. You're there. Go explore. And he starts to explore, and God shows up, and he's like, boom, altar. This is amazing. God's showing up in my life. Everything's going according to plan. And this is where I'm supposed to settle. My descendants are going to live here forever, and we can't survive. There's no food to eat. We literally will die if we stay put. The question is posed. What do we do when things don't go according to plan? What is Abram and his household to do? He decides to head towards Egypt. He changes course. Rather than staying put, he goes to a new foreign land. He left his household and became a wanderer. Now, a wanderer with a goal in mind, but didn't know exactly where we're supposed to end up. He gets there, and it's like, yeah, this is great. And now, he has to become a refugee. He has to take him and his household and bring them to a place they've never been before. They're entering as foreigners. They don't speak the language the same way. They don't worship God the same way. All these things are very different, but he's begging to survive because otherwise he's going to die. So we pick up from there. And he was about to enter Egypt. He said to his wife, Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. Men, this is a good line. Just say that part. Don't say the next part, all right? Just all the time. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Like he's realizing, okay, my wife is attractive, we're foreigners, we're different, we're outside the norm. This may present a weird situation. So let's try to twist the story a little bit. He says, they will kill me, but let you live, because you're attractive. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. Think about how this flies in the face of what the promise was earlier. Like God's like, I got you, I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to bless not only you, but the world through you, which means you kind of have to be alive and have to have a family for this to happen. And now he's like, listen, wife, why don't you put yourself in a really compromising situation for my survival? It should be noted that there's no text saying she responded. Like she was like, this is a great plan, let's do this. So it unfolds kind of like he had thought. It says when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. They were like, King, there's this foreign woman who's here and she's unbelievably beautiful. You might want her. So they take her into his palace, meaning she was brought into not just his household, right, the palace of the kingdom of Egypt. She was probably brought into the royal harem where she would live amongst the other wives and the concubines for activities. Yeah, right. Except she's married to Abram. And he is looked at as like one of the heroes of the faith. Not so good. And then it says that Pharaoh, treated Abram well for her sake. And it gets better for him. And then he acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and the big one, camels. You're going to want those camels. Yep. The truth is, he started to benefit from this situation at the expense of the security, the well-being of his wife and his family. This is a weird situation that he has built for himself. We have to ask the question, whose plan is this? I don't remember hearing the Egypt part and selling your wife into the household of Pharaoh for your benefit as part of the great blessing that God had promised him. Whose plan is this? And it's so difficult and so messed up that literally Abram cannot get himself out of the situation. There's no rescuing himself out of this. It literally requires a miraculous rescue from God to free Abram and his wife from this situation. The text tells us that there's these plagues that come over Pharaoh's household, and Pharaoh realizes that the timing of the plague and the timing, it connects to these foreigners showing up and wanting refuge. And so he realizes, oh my gosh, something's up here. Something doesn't add up. These people aren't who they say they are. So he goes to Abram, he's like, wait a second, you lied to me about your wife. She's not your sister. He's like, he doesn't even harm them. He doesn't even threaten them. He's like, just take your wife and all the stuff we've given you, we don't want it back, and get out of here. Just leave Egypt. You're not welcome here anymore. And so Abram and his household leave. They go from being wanderers to finding the place where they're supposed to be being refugees, and now being kicked out of Egypt. It says this. Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. And so they leave Egypt. And it says that Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev, back to that south desert area. Could you imagine the conversation that he and his wife were having? They're like, so how did it go, honey? I'm asking because it was amazing for me. I have so much new stuff. I even got an iPod. How did it go? And she doesn't, there's no record of her saying anything. It was probably a quiet conversation. Truthfully, I don't think he was thrilled. He wasn't excited about anything. I think he walked out of Egypt and he traveled and camped and set up and journeyed. I think it wasn't a victory lap of any kind. It wasn't like celebration. I think it was a walk of shame. Feeling like he took matters into his own hands. He risked his family's well-being. He forgot all about what God had said to him. and he tried to manufacture survival for himself. And so they leave. It says they went from place to place, again, journeying, camping, all that stuff, until he came back to the hill country, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier and where he had first built an altar. We're not sure if this is intentional, like retracing his steps or what, but somehow he finds himself back at the altar that he himself had put together, and it says this: there Abram called on the name of the Lord. I find that to be pretty profound, because if you read the texts, and most of it was represented here this morning, like Abram was riding high, right, when God was speaking to him and appearing to him, showing himself to be in his corner, and he travels and he gets to the place and things are going great and he builds this altar. But then when the famine happens, when the food runs out, it's like he's going to go buy the house of his dreams and then he loses his job. What happens? He runs and he takes matters into his own hands. And he compromises his own family to survive. He makes a mess of things. And then God, in his goodness, rescues him out of it. And as he's keeping his head down and walking on, he stumbles upon a place that he recognizes, because it was his altar there. And that altar changed things for him. All this time, he'd been asking this question: what do we do when things don't go according to plan? And he answered it by taking matters into his own hands, by trying to seize control, to trying to produce the positive outcome that he thought God had for him, but God stopped showing up. He took matters into his own hands. But then, through a series of unfortunate events and God's intervention, he makes his way back to the place he had been before. It says this: where he had first built an altar. He stumbled upon, he made his way back to a place where he knew for certain, without any doubt, that God had showed up, that God had spoken into his life. There was a point at which he saw God differently than he had ever seen God before, where things clicked, where he could say without any doubt that God was doing stuff in his life. He was orchestrating events and things in his life, and he put a stake in the ground, a flag in the ground, took the time to gather rocks and built an altar there as a visible, tangible marker that God showed up. And I think it changed everything for him. Because if you notice in the story, that whole Egypt episode, not once is Abram found worshiping God. There's no mention of him building altars. There's no mention of him finding trust in faith, hearing God's voice. It's like as soon as everything went kind of south and the famine showed up, he was like, this whole plan was dumb to begin with. I got to take care of me. God isn't as faithful. God isn't as trustworthy at all as I thought he would be. Or maybe it wasn't even as active as that. It was just a matter of like, I just got to make sure I live, so I just got to do what I need to do. But because of God's rescue, he finds himself back at a place where it was undeniable, where it was like, oh my gosh, why did I forget? Why was I going that way? Why didn't I remind myself that God set this whole thing up to begin with? I've been looking for answers in my own way, but this was God's plan to start. So he returns to the altar. In other words, simply put, Abram returned to an altar, a place of faith, a place of worship. He had already been. He was there. It was something he built himself. When he was building that altar initially, this is what the altar was saying. It was saying that he, God, was faithful then. He showed up. He spoke. He made things happen. Things between Abram and God were good. It felt like he was on the right path. But he needed the altar to say something different following his journey in Egypt. He needed it to say this: he will be faithful now. Indeed, he needed the reminder of where he once was with God. And for you and I think we're constantly either in a season of needing to build an altar, or we're somewhere on the other side where we're pretty close to probably having to return to one. Or maybe you're there now. Because there's going to be a time where it feels like things are good, where it clicks. Perhaps you learned something from the Bible, like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Or you were talking with somebody and it just like ignited your faith and you felt like, wow, I never saw Jesus this way before, but that makes so much sense. And you need to put a flag in the ground. You need to take some time and gather some stones and build an altar, because there's going to be a time where life just throws curveballs at your way, where things don't go according to your plan or God's, it feels like. And you're like, what am I supposed to do with all of this? And rather than kind of going your own way and making your own choice and maybe going to whatever Egypt would be for you, where it's compromising and you make decisions that seem just out of the plan, rather than you do that, you make your way back. And you pause and you remember intentionally, wait a second, he was faithful then. He's going to be faithful now. He's going to be faithful later. It rebuilds your faith. It rebuilds your trust and confidence in who God is. We're constantly in somewhere between these 2 points. And you might be closer to one or the other. So for some of us, we need to stop and pause. I'm not good at this. When everything's going great, I'll be honest, I'm not good at like taking out my phone and snapping photos. Some people are really good at that. At parties and at gatherings, they're just like, oh, everyone's having a good time. Let's commemorate this. Let's remember this and snap photos. I'm not that way. I just like to be in the moment, having the conversation, having the good time. But it's important to have those pictures. But maybe it's not photos for you. Maybe you need to commemorate it a different way. Maybe you need to stop and like write something down, put something in your calendar. So every year you get to this date, you go, oh yeah, that was the day this happened. That was the day it felt like everything made sense. That was the day it felt like my faith was strong. And we do this naturally in so many ways. It's why people celebrate anniversaries, to remember. It's why we as a church, and thousands of churches and thousands of years before us, people would celebrate with baptism to mark the moment. Baptism is an odd practice. We're dunking adults in water in front of other people. That's a weird practice, but it's meant to be different on purpose. It stands out. It's meant to be a reminder for those that got baptized, like, don't forget this day when your trust in God was strong, because he's not going to be unfaithful, but life has a way of making us want to run the other way. So don't forget this. It's why we celebrate communion, a way to remind ourselves of what Jesus has done for all of us. So I don't know what the altar needs to look like for you. I don't recommend you gather stones and set something up in your front yard and then kill an animal. I don't know how your neighbor's going to feel about that, or the HOA. But if you do that, please video it. I'd like to see it. But you might need to pause. You might be in the good season and not even know it. It might be time to remember how good God has been, so that when things aren't going great, you have a place to run to. We need to either build an altar or run to one. But you're like, okay, wait, fine. Okay, I get the idea, but I'm not a person of faith. Or maybe I'm kind of person, I've not experienced this good that you're talking about. So how do I build an altar? For you, my recommendation would be like, start gathering pebbles. If you can't gather big stones, gather small pebbles. Maybe there's a day where you're like, wow, I can't believe how well that worked out. You can assign it to God, the universe, or something else, fine, but gather it. Put a question mark on it and hold on to it. And keep doing that. And over time, you might have this big collection of pebbles where you're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't see it when I was going in through it, those circumstances, but like looking back, there's a common thread here. And perhaps God had been orchestrating and working to make these things happen. And it's not a beautiful, like, big rock pillar altar kind of thing, but perhaps it's a little altar. And it can be a reminder of how God has worked on your behalf. And it's not going to be constant, like everything's good all the time. Things don't always go according to plan, but we need a place to return to restart, to reignite our faith. For the last couple of years, I've been doing the premarital counseling here at the church, which is probably horrifying, but we recognize that things need to change, not because I'm the one doing it, but rather the couples I've been meeting with for a while have only heard my perspective, not hearing me and my wife's perspective, not hearing both sides of things. But additionally, there are probably better people out there in our community who could work with couples to like get them ready for marriage. Because we don't want just long marriages. We want like long, lifelong lasting, mutually satisfying, beautiful marriages. So our staff have been praying because our church is growing, and it's like the need is getting bigger as the church community grows. So we've been praying and thinking about this for a while. Unbeknownst to any of us, over here was another couple, a veteran couple, I call them. Like they've been married 30 years. And they're praying to like, we feel like there's some way in which we can, if there's some way in which we can be a blessing to young people in our church who are looking to get married, we'd love for an opportunity to meet with them and to help them out. So they're praying for opportunities over here while we're praying for help over here. And God, like through a series of circumstances, we connected the dots, and God, I would say, God answered both prayers together. And for me, I build an altar there. I put a flag in the ground. I gather some rocks because there's going to come a day when things are tough, whether it's in the life of the church, in my life personally, where I'm looking and I'm praying and I'm hoping for and I'm seeking and I'm searching. And I go, God, are you going to provide or not? Are you worth trusting or not? Are you actually involved in the plan or not? And what I need to do, rather than try to manufacture the end result, take matters into my own hands, and end up in some kind of Egypt where it's just a mess, I need to take a moment and purposefully pause at the altar and go, wait a second. He was faithful then. He answered that prayer already. He orchestrated these two things happening at the same time without either party knowing until we were able to connect the dots. He did that. Why wouldn't he be faithful now? Why wouldn't he be good? Why wouldn't he be worth trusting now? And imagine, what would Abram's story have been like had he, rather than run to Egypt to survive, decided, you know what? God has already spoken. And he decided to run back to the altar where he knew God had shown up. Now, we don't necessarily know exactly what would have happened, but would God have miraculously provided the food they needed, just like he provided a way out of Egypt? Maybe God would have shown himself to be even better and more trusting, and Abram's story would have been even more incredible had he chosen to run to the altar rather than run to Egypt, than to take matters into his own hands and compromise and risk his family's well-being. So what if for you and for me, if we have these altars in our lives, if we have these moments we can look back on, rather than being like, God, where are you? What are you doing? Really, this again? I can't trust you with this. We choose to pause and purposefully turn and aim towards sitting at one of the altars we have in our lives and go, wait a second. He was faithful. You were faithful before. I'm going to trust that you're going to be faithful now. What difference could that make in our own stories? What painful things could we avoid if we choose to trust and remind ourselves of his goodness?
Hey, this is Lou. Thanks for listening. I hope that this was helpful for you in some way. So a lot of people don't know this, but Community Church is completely supported by the generous donations of people like you and me. And if you'd like to join that community of financial supporters, you can go to communitychurch.net/give, or you can give anytime on our church app. And so thanks for being part of this community, whether it's locally or from a distance. Thanks for investing in your faith. And thanks for being part of something that's bigger than yourself. Hope to see you soon.